Hi. Last month I tried to do something extremely cute. This month the challenge is to make something dark. Now I make cute things like this and I make dark things like this as well. I love dark stuff and I do wish that bad things didn't exist at all, but since they exist I prefer to look reality in the face and not hide from it. Unless it's animal cruelty or something, I've had enough on that front, but at the same time I do also like to hide from everything sometimes and pretend that everything's fine in the world. And I guess I'm stuck in a loop of being curious, learning about some new horrors, and then hiding in my corner drawing cute things until I'm curious again. My art doesn't reflect very well my interest for horror. My darkest artwork, including the one I make for this video, is only slightly dark, and what I mean by that is that there's an entire universe of truly horrifying things, and maybe I'll one day get to paint what I truly consider to be painful to witness. I just wanted to say this to inspire you to create images much darker than what I make, because creating emotion in your viewers is good, even if it's a negative one, because in a way, experiencing life, even the bad parts of life, can be enjoyable if you have the right perspective. Most people will be happy to tell you the story of how they once broke a limb, or how they thought they were going to die, or how they had a weird surgery or something. And rather, it's the people who won't even watch a movie because there's some blood in it who are the strange and scary ones. So I invite you to think of the worst things that you've seen and think of what scares you and make it worse and then maybe draw that. But maybe you won't be able to show it to your friends and family then, and maybe you won't be able to fit it on your portfolio either. So it's okay to tone it down, just be aware that you're doing it. Holding back from expressing true darkness willingly is somehow better than drawing softened images just because everybody else is doing it and just acting like it's so dark when you could really do much better. In this video I want to talk about why this image works and the thinking that went behind creating it. So I started with a sketch. For sketching, I say any brush you have can work as long as it gives you some control. You don't need a pencil or line art brush. I often use the same brushes for both painting and sketching. When I'm sketching, I want the shapes to read well. I don't care at all about making a pretty drawing. I just want to have a cool looking silhouette and to fill up the canvas in a balanced way. This time I'm drawing completely from imagination. I usually almost always use reference lots of images, sometimes hundreds of them, on a single painting. So I highly recommend you do that. Next thing I do is I fill up the shape of the creature so that I can paint within this border. What I do next is the most important, and it's what's going to make your image look either cool or not cool. I start adding flat colors to everything, no shading yet. For this image I wanted to use a wide array of cold colors. I challenged myself to paint the coldest scene I could come up with. I also decided that to add visual interest to the creature's face, I would introduce the complementary color to green, which is red. So yeah, I definitely didn't give it red eyes because oh, they're so creepy. No, actually it's the process and the years of experience that led me to this decision. Yeah, definitely. I didn't need to go overboard with creating contrast on the face because naturally faces create contrast on their own. Like our brain naturally thinks faces are important. So a face can be a focal point in a painting even without having the highest visual contrast. And when I say contrast, there's many ways to create contrast, but in short it refers to how your focal point is different enough from the rest of the picture that it stands out the moment you lay eyes on the painting. Often with amateur paintings, you're going to take a look and think, okay, let's see what this is about. Meanwhile, most professionals plan their images in such a way that the subject is clear even if you were to see their painting in a tiny format. And that's simply because it's actually faster to paint like this, and the resulting image has more impact. And the good news is, planning your image in this way doesn't take more skill than what you already have. It's simply a matter of prioritizing the colors, the light, and the composition at an early stage. So how do you do that? I'd say the simple answer is just think about it. Thinking about color will make you see your image a different way than if you were thinking about light, or about composition, or about brushwork, or about anatomy, or about storytelling. So once your rough sketch is done, I use this time to think about color. I add color in big blocks and see what works and what doesn't, and I keep adjusting stuff. And once I have something that works, I'm going to also adjust the color of the line art a little and merge it with a color layer, because I find this is the sort of base that I enjoy painting over the most. I don't like wasting the intricate line art of the sketch, so merging it makes it so I can later allow the sketch to show through in certain areas that don't require much polish. I sometimes paint everything in a single layer, but I think that's a bad idea because oftentimes having just a few layers to keep some big elements separate from each other can save me a ton of time. For this one, I have 3 main layers: the creature's tail, and the background. I create a new layer, which I clip onto the creature layer, and I set this one to divide. What divide does is that it removes whatever color you have selected from the image. So if I select yellow, it removes yellow. Even if I apply this on a blue area, it will still work and it will make it go even further away from yellow. Why am I using this weird blend mode? Well, it lets me create very convincing light. So it's simple, you just go to the color wheel and select the color and saturation of your light source, and then simply click on the opposite side of the wheel to reverse the hue. And now you can paint with your desired light. The darker your color, the brighter the light, and the more saturated the color, the more saturated the light as well. For this to work well, like I said, the base layer has no shading, just flat colors. I will later give it some more shading, specifically ambient occlusion for the tight areas where neither the main light nor the ambient light can reach. And I'll discuss light in depth some other time. For now, I suggest you just try having a clear distinction between your main light and everything else. At this point, I decide where the light is coming from. Now, this is a question I think most amateurs are scared of, or they'll just give a simple answer like it's coming from here. But let me invite you to be more creative with it. Just because my main light source is coming from this direction doesn't mean I have to paint every surface that's facing this way with light. The truth is, I can do whatever I want, because the source of the light is out of the picture, and the objects that may be obstructing the light are also out of the picture. That means on this side of the painting, we could have the light as well as any amount of things blocking it, such as trees and stones and whatnot, and these things would be casting their shadow on our creature. So in the absence of seeing these things in the painting, we can take a lot of freedom with where exactly the light hits. Even though the light comes in this direction, I decided to keep the head in shadow because I thought the head is clearly the focal point anyway. If I further emphasize it, it will look boring and forced. It's a lot like the writing principle of show don't tell, where it's said that it's always better to show something in a way that the reader can understand what's happening on their own, rather than to simply tell them what's happening. Like, instead of saying this person is sad, the writer could instead describe their voice or their body language, or let it show through in the dialogue, or I don't know, I'm not much of a writer, but I assume there's many ways to get a message across to the reader, and some are better than others. And it's the same in painting. To tell you that I'm sad, I could use a sad emoji and that's it. So showing sadness isn't enough. It's not enough to put a danger sign on a creature and convey that it's dangerous. I really think that one of the core values of art is that it can give the viewer extremely specific emotions and sensations. Just giving someone an emotion or a sensation is something very basic. We do it all the time, it doesn't require art. If the definition of art is merely something that has beauty and emotion, to me that's not enough, because nature does that all the time. For some obvious example, just gemstones. You could take each type of gemstone and you'll feel slightly different about each one of them. I'll be honest, I was visiting a museum of rocks once and it felt very similar to visiting an art museum. So then, why do I make art instead of digging up rocks? Well, art has something special, something that nature itself can never do. And that thing is the ability of the artist to intentionally evoke extremely specific feelings and sensations. For this painting, I wanted to create a powerful sensation of cold and wet through the colors. The glossy texture of the skin, the dark tones implying night, and the steam coming out of the creature's beak. Even its pose supports the idea, having its shoulders tight, arms close to its body. The red of its eyes appears void of warmth in this context. I thought of giving the viewer the impression of being frozen in fear while making eye contact with the creature. Having the wet, misty atmosphere hide away the full shape of the creature supports the idea that this thing is dangerously close. The fact that we can visually observe its breath makes us feel closer as well somehow, like we're breathing the same air. And you can smell it, I suppose, the heavy smell of swamp water, blood and feathers. When you see a monster in a painting or anywhere else, you feel like the victim, while at the same time, another part of you feels like the monster. I find creatures in horror much more horrifying when they're human enough that I can put myself in their shoes, despite really not wanting to. The mutilated, the sick, the mentally ill, and the undead are especially efficient because we instinctively feel that if we get too close, whatever they have will happen to us as well. I'm sure this painting gave you a small dose of pain in your abdomen. Meanwhile, if your monster is, for example, a worm, for it to feel truly scary, I would make a painting with a strong focus on its human victims, rather than to overdo the worm itself, trying too hard to convince people that it's scary by showing spikes and fangs and legs and whatnot. So, once I have this base, I know that the result is going to work. In future videos, I'll describe other parts of the process, such as rendering stuff realistically, but for now I'll call it a day. So remember the following things you should do after you make a sketch and before you jump into painting. So, first off, think about a strong focal point and have the rest of the image support that. Decide on your colors without shading. Decide on your main 1 or 2 light sources and darken areas that don't receive ambient light. Afterwards, you can merge the light layers together with the rest and just paint. This process is going to give you the perfect underpainting, and it will allow you to pick every color you need directly from the canvas, including the colors for light and for shadow. And if your artwork already looks good at this stage, it's hard to mess it up later on, although it's not impossible. It might be a good idea to save this sketch, because if you do manage to mess it up, then you can compare the before and after and you'll see clearly what went wrong. If my sketch doesn't look good at this stage, then I might just try again. If it never works for you, then you know you have a problem either with the drawing, maybe it's perspective or anatomy or something else, or you have a problem with color or with light. I would strongly suggest you look up ways to address these fundamentals before you make big paintings. As a beginner, I would advise very strongly that you don't put more than 1 or 2 hours into a drawing or painting, and don't try to make anything finished looking. If you can't make a sketch like this, then I recommend you practice whatever step you find the hardest until you figure it out before you move on to a later stage. I'm merely suggesting before you paint 100 teeth on a creature, you should know how to paint one tooth, how to light it, and otherwise you just be practicing 100 times how to draw something wrong, and that's a trap that too many artists fall into. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.